we're going to go in and we're going to take a look at relationships.
All right.
All right. And
where's our Don Henley?
We're looking to our producer to cue us in.
There you go. That's fine.
Okay. So last week we left off with talking a little bit about the beginning of the understanding of the uniqueness of relationships in regard to husband and wife. Now, the underlying current that we have talked about is that God created us as relational beings.
Right.
And because he created us as relational beings, we have surrounding our lives various kinds of relationships. So we had gotten into up to the point of the marriage relationship when we broke things off last year, and now have restarted for this coming season. So let me so first of all, aside from the relationship that is to exist between husband and wife is to be a unique relationship. All of the relationships that are present in your life are unique in the sense that they're there and you have aspects of them that you have to deal with. But from a scriptural standpoint, the relationship that exists between husband and wife is totally unique, because what Scripture talks about is that there is a bonding that takes place between men and women. And it's not just a spiritual, it is supposed to be, according to the ideal of Scripture, it is supposed to be a spiritual, emotional, physical bonding which takes place. And that is unique to any other relationship that is presented to us in Scripture or mankind has to deal with.
What would you say about? Okay, like let me ask you to talk a little more about this. What would you say about the Scripture presents the relationship of the Trinity, right?
Right.
Marriage is
we talked about that.
Diminished in comparison. So, right. It is unique, but it's not supreme over that. But then, secondly, like, what would you say about like the mother and a child, for instance? Where the child is gestated and then suckles and, so on and so forth. Right.
Well, first of all, the issue of the Trinity, we're not talking about the relationship that is between husband and wife supersedes the relationship of God. Actually, in what Scripture presents is that when a man and woman come together, the nature of their bonding together and coming together is to be is brought together by the relationship they have with God as well. So the husband and wife and God, the three of them then form a relationship where they can bond together in that process of becoming one. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind Scripture then is that oneness, as it were, is so tight that it's interwoven. Mm-hmm. And so ideally, in a spiritual sense, the husband and wife understand who God has called them, the roles that he has called them each to play within the marriage relationship to make the relationship stable and strong. Just like in the Trinity, we have a recognition that each of the members of the Trinity have different roles that they play in order for there to be harmony within them, and yet they are still considered one. Mm-hmm. And the relationship that exists between husband and wife, there is still a recognition of who they are as individuals, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. But that they are to be so close and harmonious in their thinking as they've bonded together that they act as one. Now,
right.
we're talking
we're
talking about the ideal here.
Right. I'm just asking about the comparison.
Well,
of, this is unique. There's nothing else like it. Like I'm thinking about moms out there and like
Okay,
what their
so
thought is on that.
I'm glad you're sensitive to that. So
I'm just aware of it.
the bond that takes place between the mother and her children, and we talked a little bit about this last year, but the bond that takes place between the mother and the children is present, but there is to be a breaking of that bond.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the bond between the mother and child, in particular, is that the mother addresses the specific needs of the child as the child is developing, in being able to slowly, through maturation, become able to become productive and enter into society. But at some point, that relationship that exists between parent and child is meant to be broken and reestablished in a different venue.
Sure.
And that is not to be the case with the husband and wife.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's the major difference between
Yeah.
the two. I don't deny the fact that there's a unique bond between mothers and particularly their children. In fact, I've had this discussion before with my own spouse, and we've talked about the fact that one of the most difficult things that mothers face as their children grow, and you hear many, if you've ever read like Dear Abby or Ann Landers. Or,
They're sisters, right?
I know they're sisters, but I'm
Yeah.
kind of dating myself. I guess they've got a new person now doing that.
I don't know, but I know the personality is still happening.
And you read some of the things that particularly older women write in about the difficulty they have with their children and the actions their children are or are not
Right.
taking, and how they grieve or how they they hang on to those things. One of the most difficult things for women to learn and to understand is that relationship with your children is to develop, and that bonding breaks, and then puts you into a different light in how you deal with them as they're older.
Yeah, there's definitely a different polarity to the relationship of marriage versus child.
Yeah, and I would just say that our society has not helped women within this instance of learning how to deal with that.
Or children, right?
Oh, yes.
Our
yes.
society has tried to usurp the God intended action, and I think that polarity, and I think that's one of the reasons why it is such a detriment. When you look at the relationship, you see such a negative impact when a mother or a father replaces their spouse with their child. And I'm not even talking sexually.
Yeah.
I'm when they say things like, "You are my all, you're my everything, you're my one true love," like all this sort of stuff. There's an interesting phenomenon in psychology where a child, you'll have to look this up for yourself, but where if a child is doted on by their mother, nothing sexual happens or anything like that, but they're doted on by their mother, they're turned into the universe of their mother. When they grow older, they exhibit signs that are similar to having been sexually abused.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you see the cliche of that in like movies where it's like, this psycho. Well, Psycho, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Psycho's a good example, but you see examples of this cliches in this movie where the culture sort of has a zeitgeist of understanding that, if a person's like really messed up, they probably had a weird relationship with their mother, where the mother was like overbearing and like all this sort of stuff.
Right, and the classic example, not to pick on, but the classic example is like Jewish or Italian mothers, or those that are just constantly doting on their children. Well, I can't remember the name of that movie, but the one with Sylvester Stallone and Estelle Getty, where
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Yeah.
I
Great,
mean,
funny movie. But
I think
some
it's
real
Stop or
truths
My
there.
Mom Will Shoot.
Yeah. You're right.
That's a terrible movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie because but
It fits all the cliches.
It does. But the point is that relationship is not the same as the relationship that is to exist between husband and wife.
And it shouldn't be, and it's really important that we keep those two separate and not and not crossing a sexual line doesn't mean that you're keeping them separate.
No, not at all. So when you go back to Genesis and you look at, we're referring to the passage where it is ending in, I believe, Genesis chapter 2, but it basically says that the man will leave the father and mother and cleave to a wife, and the two shall
Right.
become one. The word cleave there really means to be bonded together in such a way that they're intertwined, and so if you try to remove them, you can't remove one from the other without there being the tearing of the of both entities that have been cleaved together. And what Scripture talks about is that this unique bond that to exist then between husband and wife is unique from all of creation, because it is in fact it's supposed to be a representation of God's bonding to us as his people.
Yeah, and I think importantly, you see when God talks about the church, specifically, he uses that terminology that we are the bride of Christ, that we are, that we're his wife in that sense, that there is supposed to be a molding of that. As God, as Christ is the imprint of the invisible God, like the church is to be the imprint of the not present Christ. I don't know how else to say that. And there is that mesh that takes place where the Spirit of God resides within the church, so that we are fully incorporated into his body. We are one organism with our spouse in God, with our divine spouse. Don't take that term and make it mystical. It's not supposed to be. It's just descriptive. But yeah.
So next week, what we're going to talk about is we're going to explore this first. So what we've done is we've laid some foundation again for today. But what we're going to explore further then is, okay, so we know what Scripture says. We know the ideal and the uniqueness of this bonding that is there in that relationship. But there are some practical things that we have to deal with because of our humanity in trying to make this work. And that's really the trick. We understand from Scripture that it's a unique relationship, but trying to make it work, that's a different thing, because there are a number of different factors that have to be looked at. And so we'll begin discussing that next week.